The real estate agent never mentioned the hatch. Marcus Webb found it 3 days after moving into his new cabin, hidden beneath a worn Persian rug in what the listing had optimistically called a cozy den. The rug itself should have been a warning: too expensive, too well-maintained for a cabin that had sat empty for 18 months. People don't leave valuable things behind unless they're covering something worse. The hatch was square, about 3 feet across, made from steel that had been painted the same color as the floorboards. Someone had gone to great effort to make it blend in. Marcus only found it because he'd been ripping up the old carpet, planning to refinish the hardwood underneath. His crowbar had struck metal instead of wood, producing a hollow clang that echoed through the empty house in a way that made his stomach drop. He stood there for 20 minutes, just staring at it, before he worked up the courage to brush away the debris and see it clearly. There was a recessed handle, and beside it, scratched into the metal with something sharp, were 3 words: "Don't go down." Marcus had bought this cabin to escape. Escape the city, escape his failed marriage, escape the panic attacks that had turned his life into a minefield of anxiety. He'd wanted peace, solitude, a place where the only sounds were wind through pine trees and the occasional call of an owl. Instead, he'd bought a mystery that sat beneath his feet like a mouth waiting to swallow him whole. Welcome back to the channel, everyone. Before we dive into this nightmare, I need to know, where are you watching from right now? Somewhere safe, I hope. Somewhere with locks on the doors. Because the story I'm about to tell you is about a man who thought he'd found sanctuary only to discover that some properties come with inheritance you can't refuse. If this gets under your skin, good. That means you're paying attention. Hit that like button, smash subscribe, and drop a comment telling me what you'd do if you found a hidden hatch in your floor. Would you open it? Or would you run because Marcus opened it? And what he found down there changed everything. The cabin sat on 43 acres of forest in northern Maine, 30 miles from the nearest town. Marcus had seen the listing online 3 months after his divorce was finalized, during one of those 3 a.m. anxiety spirals where he'd convinced himself he needed to change everything about his life or drown in the wreckage of the old one. The price had been suspiciously low. $97,000 for a 2-bedroom cabin with a stone fireplace, a wraparound porch, and enough land to ensure he'd never have to see another human being unless he wanted to. The property had been in foreclosure. The previous owner, a man named Edmund Rothwell, had died without heirs, and the bank was eager to move it. Marcus's therapist had suggested the move was reactive and potentially isolating. His ex-wife had called it running away. His mother had cried and begged him not to disappear into the wilderness like some hermit waiting to die. But Marcus had stopped listening to other people's opinions. He'd signed the papers, packed his Toyota 4Runner with everything he couldn't bear to leave behind, and driven 9 hours north into territory where cell service was a distant memory, and the stars at night were so bright they looked artificial. The cabin was exactly as the photos had shown it, rustic, but solid, built from logs that had weathered to a deep honey color. Inside, the previous owner had left behind an eclectic collection of furniture, a leather couch that smelled of pipe tobacco, bookshelves filled with old paperbacks, a kitchen table with 4 mismatched chairs, and that Persian rug covering the den floor. The first 2 nights had been perfect. Marcus had built fires in the stone fireplace, read by lamplight, and fallen asleep to the sound of wind moving through the forest. He'd woken feeling more rested than he had in months, his mind quiet for the first time since the divorce papers had arrived. He'd even started to think his therapist was wrong. This wasn't running away. This was finding himself. Then he found the hatch, and with it a manila envelope tucked between the floorboards, sealed with wax that had partially melted from age. Inside were 3 items: a handwritten letter, a brass key on a leather cord, and a Polaroid photograph so disturbing that Marcus had to set it down and walk away the first time he looked at it. The photograph showed the interior of what appeared to be a root cellar or bunker concrete walls illuminated by harsh fluorescent light. In the center of the frame was a metal chair, and on the wall behind it, someone had written the same words scratched into the hatch: "Don't go down." But it was what sat in the chair that made Marcus's hands shake. A mannequin, or what he desperately hoped was a mannequin, dressed in a white hospital gown, its head tilted at an angle that suggested a broken neck. The face had been painted to look realistic, but the expression was all wrong, frozen in a look of such abject terror that it seemed impossible for plastic and paint to capture. The letter was dated 6 months before Edmund Rothwell's death. It was addressed to whoever buys this place, and it began with 5 words that Marcus would never forget. "I should have filled it in." Marcus didn't sleep that night. He sat on the leather couch, the letter spread on the coffee table in front of him, reading and rereading Edmund Rothwell's confession by lamplight. "To whoever buys this place, I should have filled it in. I should have sealed it with concrete, burned the cabin down, salted the earth. But I was weak, and I was curious, and I convinced myself I could control it. I bought this land in 1987. The cabin was already here, built in the 1940s, by a man whose name I never learned. The hatch was here too, hidden beneath layers of carpet and linoleum. I found it during renovations, just like you probably did. I went down. I won't tell you everything I found, partly because you wouldn't believe me, and partly because knowing might make it worse. But I'll tell you this, there are 37 rooms down there. They branch off like a maze, going deeper and deeper into the earth. Some are empty. Some have furniture. Some have things that shouldn't exist. Room 17 has the chair. If you've seen the photo, you know the one I mean. Don't sit in it. Don't sit in the chair. Room 23 has the mirrors. They don't show your reflection. Not exactly. They show something close to you, but not quite right. I spent 6 hours down there once comparing my reflection to what the mirrors showed, making a list of all the differences. The list got to 43 items before I stopped counting, because I realized the reflection was moving on its own. Room 37 is locked. I never found the key, but sometimes at night I can hear something moving behind that door. Pacing, breathing, waiting. I'm dying now, cancer. The doctors say 6 months, but I can feel it's less. I tried to tell my lawyer about the hatch, tried to have it written into the property disclosure, but he thought I was delusional from the pain medication. Maybe I am, God, I hope I am. If you're reading this, you've already found it. You have a choice to make. You can take the key I've left you and go down. You can explore. You can try to understand what's beneath this place. Or you can do what I should have done, pour concrete down that hole until it's full, sell this property for whatever you can get, and never look back. But if you do go down, follow these rules. 1. Never go below level 3. 2. Never speak to anything you meet down there, even if it looks human. 3. Never turn off your light. 4. If you hear your own voice calling from another room, leave immediately. 5. The door to room 37 must never be opened. I've failed at all of these rules at least once. I'm paying for it now. Every night I dream I'm in that chair in room 17, and I can't move, and something is walking toward me from the darkness. Something that wears my face but isn't me. Save yourself. Fill it in. Don't be like me. Edmund Rothwell. Marcus set the letter down with trembling hands. This was insane. It had to be some kind of joke, a prank left by the previous owner to scare the next buyer. People didn't build underground labyrinths beneath rural Maine cabins. They didn't have rooms with mirrors that showed wrong reflections or chairs that you couldn't sit in. Except Edmund Rothwell had died here. Alone. From cancer, the death certificate said. But Marcus had found that certificate in the packet of documents from the bank, and he'd noticed something odd. The body had been discovered in the cabin's den directly on top of the hatch, as if Edmund had been guarding it, or trying to keep something from coming out. Marcus walked to the den. The hatch sat there innocuous in the lamplight, just a square of painted steel. He could barely see the scratched warning anymore. Don't go down, but he knew it was there, carved by a dying man's desperate hand. He should leave, pack his bags, drive back to Boston, take the financial loss, and count himself lucky. That's what a rational person would do. Instead, Marcus picked up the brass key. It was heavier than it looked, the metal warm, despite sitting in an envelope for months. The leather cord was worn smooth, as if Edmund had carried it around his neck for years. Marcus held it up to the lamp, examining it. A simple design, old-fashioned, the kind of key that belonged to a door from another era. The kind of key that had been used many, many times. Marcus knelt beside the hatch. Up close, he could see scratches around the handle, evidence of countless openings. He could also see something else, smears of rust that might have been old paint, or might have been something worse. "This is stupid," he said aloud, and his voice sounded too loud in the quiet cabin. "This is absolutely insane." But his hand was already on the handle, and with a sound like a sigh, the hatch opened. The smell hit him first. Cold air carrying the scent of damp concrete and something organic like mushrooms growing in darkness. A ladder descended into blackness, metal rungs bolted into concrete walls. Marcus couldn't see the bottom. He grabbed his LED camping lantern from the porch and clicked it on. The beam cut through the darkness, revealing the ladder going down approximately 15 feet before reaching what looked like a concrete floor. "Just a look," Marcus whispered to himself. "Just down and back up. 5 minutes. Just to see if the old man was crazy, or if there's actually something down there." He started climbing down. The ladder rungs were cold beneath his hands, the metal slightly damp. As he descended, the temperature dropped, his breath forming visible mists in the lantern's glow. The walls were smooth concrete, professionally poured with no obvious seams. This wasn't some amateur project. Someone had engineered this space with skill and purpose. His feet touched the floor. Marcus swept the lantern in a circle, taking in his surroundings. He was standing in a corridor about 8 feet wide, stretching in both directions, beyond his light's reach. Doors lined both walls, painted industrial gray, each one marked with a number in white stencil. He could see rooms 1 through 6 from where he stood. Room 1's door stood slightly ajar. Marcus knew he should go back up. He'd seen enough to confirm Edmund Rothwell hadn't been delusional. There really was something down here, something substantial and disturbing. That should be sufficient. That should be enough to satisfy his curiosity and convince him to seal this place forever. But the door to room 1 was open. Just a crack. Just enough to suggest an invitation. Marcus pushed it wider and stepped inside. Room 1 was a perfect cube, 10 feet on each side, completely empty, except for a single object centered on the floor. A rotary telephone, black and ancient-looking, sitting on a small wooden table. The phone was ringing. Marcus froze in the doorway, his lantern beam fixed on the telephone as it rang again. A mechanical sound, the actual bell inside the device being struck by a physical hammer. This wasn't a recording. This was a real phone connected to something receiving an actual call. But that was impossible. The cabin didn't have a landline. There were no cables running down here, no junction boxes, no visible connections. And even if there were, who the hell would be calling a phone buried beneath a cabin in the Maine wilderness ring? Ring. Ring. Marcus's therapist had taught him breathing exercises for moments of high anxiety. He used them now, forcing air in through his nose and out through his mouth, trying to slow his racing heart. This was some kind of prank. Maybe the property had been used for an escape room or Halloween haunted house. Maybe Edmund Rothwell had been eccentric and built all this as an elaborate hobby. The phone rang a 12th time. Marcus's hand reached for it, without conscious decision, his body moving on autopilot. He lifted the receiver and held it to his ear. Static. Deep, crackling static, like an old radio searching for a signal. And beneath it, something else. A voice, distant and distorted, speaking words he couldn't quite make out. "Hello," Marcus said, immediately regretting it. Edmund's first rule, never speak to anything you meet down there, even if it looks human. The static cut off. Silence filled the line, but it wasn't empty silence. It was the silence of someone listening, breathing quietly, waiting. Then, clear as a bell, his own voice came through the receiver. "You shouldn't have come down here, Marcus." He dropped the phone like it had burned him. It clattered against the table, the receiver swinging on its cord, and from it came the sound of laughter, his own laughter, but wrong, somehow too long, too hollow, like an echo that had learned to laugh on its own. Marcus backed out of room 1 and slammed the door. His hands were shaking so badly, he almost dropped the lantern. This wasn't curiosity anymore. This wasn't exploration. This was wrong in a way that went beyond rational explanation. He should climb back up the ladder. Right now. Seal the hatch. Call someone the police, and tell them what that a dead phone in an underground bunker had called itself. But room 4's door was also open, just a crack. And through that crack came light. Flickering orange light, like a candle flame. "No," Marcus said aloud, trying to convince himself. "No, we're done. We're going back up." His feet carried him to room 4 anyway. Inside, dozens of candles covered every surface, the floor shelves built into the walls, even suspended from the ceiling on chains. They were all lit, all burning steadily, despite no visible source of ignition and no one to tend them. The room smelled of wax and something sweeter, almost floral. In the center of the room stood a mirror full-length framed in ornate wood that looked Victorian in style. The glass was old, slightly warped, giving everything it reflected a dreamlike quality. Marcus approached it slowly, holding up his lantern. His reflection looked back at him 42 years old, graying hair beard that needed trimming, wearing the same flannel shirt and jeans he'd put on this morning. Then the reflection smiled. Marcus wasn't smiling. The reflection's smile widened, revealing too many teeth, and it raised one hand in a wave. Marcus's own hand remained at his side, gripping the lantern handle. "Room 23 has the mirrors," Edmund's letter had said. "They don't show your reflection." Not exactly. But this was room 4, not room 23, which meant there were multiple mirrors down here. Multiple rooms where reality didn't quite match itself. Marcus's reflection tilted its head, studying him, with eyes that had gone completely black, reflecting no light. Then it mouthed 3 words, "I'm coming up." Marcus ran. He bolted from room 4 down the corridor, his lantern beam bouncing wildly off the walls. Behind him, he heard the sound of glass shattering, followed by footsteps not echoing from the room he'd left, but coming from ahead, from deeper in the complex. Something was down here with him, something that wore his face. He needed the ladder. He needed to climb up, seal the hatch, and never think about this place again. But in his panic, he'd gotten turned around. Was the ladder behind him or ahead? The corridor looked the same in both directions, identical doors with identical numbers, and his heart was pounding so hard he couldn't think clearly. Room 17. He ran past room 17, and through its window, each door had a small window. He realized thick glass that looked like it had been designed to withstand impact. He saw it. The chair from the Polaroid. And sitting in that chair perfectly still was the mannequin. Except as his light swept past, the mannequin's head turned to follow him. Its mouth opened in a silent scream. Marcus's legs went weak, but he forced himself to keep running. The footsteps behind him were getting closer, matching his pace exactly. He risked a glance back and saw his own reflection running after him, except this version was grinning, its face stretched into an expression of pure, malicious joy. Then he saw at the ladder 20 feet ahead, the way out. Marcus put on a burst of speed, his lungs burning, and grabbed the first rung. He started climbing, hand over hand, not looking back, not daring to see how close his pursuer had gotten. He was halfway up when something grabbed his ankle. Marcus looked down. His reflection stood at the base of the ladder, looking up at him with those black eyes, its grip on his ankle impossibly strong. It was pulling him down, dragging him back into the darkness. "Let go!" Marcus screamed, kicking with his free leg. His boot connected with the thing's face and it recoiled, releasing him. He didn't wait. He scrambled up the remaining rungs and hauled himself out of the hatch, rolling across the den floor. He spun around and slammed the hatch shut, the metal clanging with a sound like a prison door closing. For several minutes, he just lay there gasping, his whole body trembling with adrenaline. Then he heard it. From below the hatch, faint but unmistakable knocking. 3 taps, pause, 3 taps, pause, 3 taps, and his own voice muffled by steel. "Marcus, why did you lock me down here? Let me out, please, I'm scared." For 3 days, Marcus didn't open the hatch. He pushed his couch over it, weighted it down with everything heavy he could find, and tried to pretend the underground complex didn't exist. He called his mother his ex-wife, even his therapist having normal conversations that felt surreal given what lay beneath his feet. But every night, he heard the knocking. 3 taps, pause, 3 taps, pause, 3 taps. And every night, the voice from below grew more desperate, more convincing. "Marcus, please. I've been down here for days. I don't know how I got here. You understand? Somehow we split. We both exist. But I'm trapped down here in the dark, and you're up there in the light. That's not fair. That's not right. We should at least talk about this." On the 4th night, Marcus found himself standing in front of the hatch. The couch pushed aside, his hand on the handle. He wasn't sure when he'd moved it. He'd been in bed one moment, and then he was here like sleepwalking, except he was wide awake. "That's it," the voice said from below, encouraging now. "Just open it. Just for a moment. We need to talk, you and I. We need to figure out what happened down there. Together." Marcus's hand turned the handle. The hatch opened. Nothing came out. No monster, no reflection, no double wearing his face. Just the dark hole and the ladder descending into black. "Come down," his voice called from below. "I can't come up. Something's wrong with the ladder on this side. I think it's broken. But if you come down, we can figure this out. We can fix this." This was insane. This was how horror movies played out. The protagonist making the stupid decision that everyone in the audience screamed at them not to make. But Marcus found himself grabbing his lantern again, found his feet on the ladder rungs, found himself descending into that cold, damp darkness. He reached the bottom and swept his light around the corridor. Empty. No sign of his double, no indication anyone had been here at all. "Where are you?" Marcus called out. "Room 17, came the reply, echoing from deeper in the complex. "Hurry, something's wrong. I think I'm hurt." Room 17. The room with the chair. The room Edmund's letter had specifically warned about. "Don't sit in the chair." Marcus walked down the corridor, his lantern throwing long shadows across the walls. Most of the doors were closed now, sealed tight, as if the complex itself was holding its breath. He reached room 17 and looked through the window. The chair sat in the center, empty now. His double stood beside it, illuminated by fluorescent lights that Marcus definitely hadn't turned on. The double looked exactly like him, same clothes, same posture, same exhausted expression. "Thank God," the double said, and its voice came through the door clearly, as if the barrier between them was meaningless. "I thought you weren't coming. I thought you were going to leave me down here forever." "What are you?" Marcus asked, keeping his distance from the door. "I'm you. Or I was you. I'm not sure anymore." The double touched its own face as if checking to confirm it was real. "When you came down here the first time, when you looked in that mirror in room 4, I think that's when I split off. I'm the reflection that became real. The part of you that wanted to stay, to explore, to understand what this place is. That's not possible. None of this is possible, Marcus. But here we are." The double moved closer to the door, and Marcus instinctively stepped back. "I've been exploring. I've been to rooms you haven't seen. I've gone down to level 3, to level 4. I've seen things that will change everything you think you know about reality." Edmund said never to go below level 3. Edmund was afraid. Edmund let fear control him, and look where it got him, dead alone, having wasted decades guarding a secret he never fully understood. The double's expression intensified. But you and I, we don't have to be like him. We can learn. We can discover. We can go to room 37 and see what's behind that locked door. Marcus's hand instinctively went to his pocket, where the brass key rested on its leather cord. How do you know about the key? The double smiled. Because you're wearing it. Because I'm you. Because we share the same memories, the same thoughts, the same curiosity that brought us down here in the first place. If you're me, why are you in there and I'm out here? Because one of us has to open the door to room 37. The double's smile widened. And that door only opens from the outside. I've tried. But with both of us, one inside, one outside, we can finally see what Edmund was so afraid of. No, Marcus said, backing away further. No, this is exactly what Edmund warned about. Never speak to anything down here, even if it looks human. I'm not a thing, the double said, and for the first time its voice carried an edge of anger. I'm you. I'm the part of you that's brave enough to face the unknown instead of running from it. And deep down, you know I'm right. You know you'll never be able to leave here without knowing what's in room 37. It'll eat at you forever, that question. You'll end up like Edmund, dying alone, still wondering. Marcus's hand was on the key, gripping it so tightly, the metal cut into his palm. Because the double was right. He did want to know. He'd wanted to know since he'd first read Edmund's letter, wanted to know what could possibly be behind a locked door that a dying man had warned about with his last words. Where is room 37? Marcus asked quietly. The double's face lit up with triumph. End of the corridor, level 3. Past room 30. Past the point where Edmund stopped exploring. Come on, I'll show you. Marcus followed his double deeper into the complex, the thing walking ahead of him, visible through the windows of each room they passed. Room 20 empty, except for a single chair facing the corner. Room 23, Edmund's mirror room, where a dozen reflections of Marcus stared back at him, each one slightly wrong. Room 29 filled with filing cabinets, papers spilling onto the floor, covered in handwriting that looked like Edmund's but became increasingly illegible, deteriorating into scribbles and mad geometric shapes. Then the corridor ended at a stairway going down. Level 3. The air was different here, colder, yes, but also thicker, pressing against Marcus's skin like water. His ears popped. The fluorescent lights overhead flickered irregularly, creating strobing shadows that hurt to look at. And at the end of this level's corridor, he saw it. Room 37, its door different from all the others. This one was steel industrial with massive hinges and a lock that looked like it belonged on a bank vault. His double was already there, waiting, pressing its face against the small window. Can you see inside? Marcus asked, approaching slowly. No, the glass is frosted, but I can feel it, Marcus. Can't you? Something's alive in there. Something's been waiting for someone to finally turn that key. Marcus stopped 3 feet from the door. This close, he could feel it too, a vibration subtle but persistent emanating from whatever was inside. And a sound barely audible breathing. Slow, measured, patient breathing that suggested something vast. Open it, the double said. Use the key. Let's finally know the truth. Marcus pulled the key from his pocket. The brass was warm, almost hot, as if responding to proximity to the lock. He stepped forward, holding it up to the massive keyhole. "That's it," the double whispered. "Turn it, open it, set it free. Set it free." The words hung in the air like a curse. Marcus froze the key inches from the lock. "You said we wanted to see what's inside," Marcus said slowly. "Not set it free." The double's expression flickered just for a moment, a crack in the mask. "Same thing. We can't see it if it's locked up." "No," Marcus said, understanding flooding through him. "No, you don't want to see what's inside. You want me to release it." "Marcus, you're not me. You're not my reflection." Marcus backed away from the door from his double. "You're something that lives down here. Something that needs someone to open that door from the outside." The double's face changed. The features remained the same, but the expression became something alien, something that had never been human, trying to remember how humans looked when they were angry. "You were so close," it said, and its voice was no longer Marcus's voice. It was layered multiple voices speaking in unison, some human, some not. "Decades I've been here. Decades of waiting. Edmund wouldn't do it. The ones before him wouldn't do it. But you were curious. You were brave. You were perfect. What are you?" "A collector," it said, and now it was smiling with far too many teeth. "This place," it gestured at the complex around them, "is mine. My nest, my gallery. Room 17 has my failures. Room 4 has my mirrors. Room 1 has my voice. And room 37 has my body. Your body. What's left of it? The part that couldn't fit through the cracks in reality. The part that's been trapped behind that door since this world was young." The thing wearing Marcus's face pressed itself against room 17's window. "But if you open that door, I can recombine. I can become whole. And then..." It licked its lips with a tongue that was too long, too black. "Then I can finally leave this place. I can walk up those stairs through that cabin into your world. And I'll be wearing your face when I do it." Marcus ran. He sprinted back down the corridor, past the rooms of horrors, his lantern beams swinging wildly. Behind him, he heard the thing laughing, not with his voice anymore, but with something ancient and hungry. He reached the stairs, took them 2 at a time, his heart hammering against his ribs. Level 2 now. He could see the ladder ahead, could see the open hatch, and the den beyond, could see freedom. Then every door on level 2 opened simultaneously. Things emerged from the rooms. Not human, not animal, not anything that should exist. They were Edmund's words, made flesh, the things that shouldn't exist. The residents of this underground nightmare all converging on Marcus as he ran. He reached the ladder and started climbing. Something grabbed at his leg, but he kicked free, kept climbing hand over hand, the light from above getting closer. 10 feet, 5 feet, 3 feet. Marcus burst through the hatch and rolled across the den floor. But this time he had something in his hand, the brass key gripped so tightly his palm bled. He slammed the hatch shut and with shaking hands locked it. The key turned in a lock he hadn't noticed before, hidden in the hatch's frame. Click. The sound of something sealing, something being contained. From below came screaming. Not one voice, but dozens, hundreds, a cacophony of rage and frustration that made the floor vibrate. Then slowly, the screaming faded. The house fell silent. Marcus stood up, still holding the key, and walked to the kitchen. He found a hammer in the utility drawer, returned to the den, and systematically destroyed the hatch's lock, bending the metal, making it impossible for the key to ever turn again. Then he walked outside, dug a hole in the yard, and buried the key 6 feet deep beneath the old oak tree. Marcus hired contractors the next day. They came from Portland, a crew that specialized in concrete work, and they didn't ask questions when he told them he wanted the hatch sealed. They poured concrete into the opening until it was completely filled, then poured a new floor over the entire den, covering any evidence the hatch had ever existed. The work took 3 days. Marcus stayed in a motel in town while it was done, unable to sleep in the cabin with that hole still open beneath his feet. On the second night, he dreamed he was back in room 17, sitting in the chair, unable to move while something walked toward him from the darkness, wearing his face. He woke up screaming. When the contractors finished, the den floor was smooth uniform, showing no sign of the complex beneath. Marcus paid them double their asking price and made them promise never to mention the work to anyone. They agreed, probably thinking he was just another eccentric hermit with money to burn. That night, Marcus built a fire in the stone fireplace and burned everything: Edmund's letter, the Polaroid, the envelope, all the documents related to the hatch. He watched the paper curl and blacken, watched the words, "Don't go down," disappear into ash. He could almost convince himself it had been a nightmare, a stress-induced hallucination brought on by the isolation and the anxiety of his new life. People didn't build underground mazes beneath their cabins. Reflections didn't become real. Ancient entities didn't live in sealed rooms, waiting for someone foolish enough to open the door. Except he knew better. The fresh concrete in his den was real. The scar on his palm from gripping the key too tightly was real. And sometimes, late at night, he could still hear things beneath his feet. Faint sounds, like breathing, like pacing, like something waiting with eternal patience. Marcus called his real estate agent, listed the cabin for sale, cut the price in half, then half again, but no one came to look at it. Every potential buyer who scheduled a viewing canceled at the last minute. After 3 months, the agent stopped returning his calls. The cabin, it seemed, didn't want to be sold. So Marcus did what Edmund had done. He stayed. He learned to live with the knowledge of what lay beneath him. He developed routines, rules of his own. Never spend too long alone in the den. Never put his ear to the floor. Never dig in the backyard where the key was buried. And most importantly, ever look for another hatch. Because sometimes late at night, he wondered if there were other entrances to the complex, other ways down. Edmund's letter had only mentioned the one in the den, but what if there were more? What if the entire property sat above that underground nest, that gallery of horrors, and there were a dozen hatches scattered across 43 acres just waiting to be discovered? Marcus didn't look, didn't explore his own land, stayed close to the cabin, and tried not to think about what might be burrowing beneath the soil, mapping the surface world, waiting for another opportunity. He'd sealed one door. But how many remained? 6 months after sealing the hatch, Marcus woke to find his den floor had cracked. Not a dramatic split, not something that looked like the concrete had failed. Just a thin hairline fracture, barely visible, running from where the hatch used to be to the wall. When he knelt to examine it, he could feel cold air rising from the crack. and hear something, that familiar wet breathing, that patient exhalation from lungs that had never tasted open air. The contractors had poured 3 feet of concrete. It should have been impossible for anything to crack through. Should have been impossible for any sound to carry through that much solid material, unless something was digging, expanding, growing. Marcus called the contractors back. They returned, examined the crack, and gave him bad news. The foundation beneath the concrete had shifted. Soil subsidence, they called it, probably due to an underground water source. They could pour more concrete, sure, but it would likely crack again unless they addressed the underlying problem. What underlying problem? Marcus asked, though he already knew the answer. Something beneath your property is hollow. A cave system maybe, or an old mine. We'd need to bring in ground-penetrating radar to map it properly. Could be expensive. Marcus sent them away. Declined the ground-penetrating radar because he didn't need a map to know what was beneath his property. He'd already seen it, already explored enough to know that it was vast, incomprehensible, and very much alive. That night, he heard knocking for the first time in months. 3 taps, pause, 3 taps, pause, 3 taps. Coming not from the sealed hatch, but from his bedroom closet. Marcus opened the closet door slowly. Inside, behind his hanging clothes, the back wall had a new feature. A small hatch, 2 feet square, made from the same painted steel as the original, and scratched into the metal in letters he recognized from Edmund's frantic handwriting. Room 37 is open. Marcus stepped back, his blood turning to ice. This wasn't possible. He'd locked the key away. He'd buried it beneath 6 feet of soil. No one could have opened room 37. No one could have turned that lock, unless the thing inside had finally gotten strong enough to open it from within. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Thank you for the key, Marcus. Did you really think burying it would keep it from me? Metal calls to metal. I've been pulling it down inch by inch through the soil. It took months, but I'm very patient. And now I'm free. Marcus ran to his bedroom window and looked out at the yard. In the moonlight, he could see the area where he'd buried the key. The soil was disturbed, a small hole leading down into darkness. Another text, I'm coming up, room by room, level by level. I wonder which door I'll emerge from. Maybe your closet. Maybe your basement. Maybe I'm already in your house, standing behind you right now, wearing your face. Marcus spun around. The bedroom was empty, but in the mirror above his dresser, he saw his reflection. And his reflection was smiling. It raised one hand and waved. Then it stepped out of the mirror. Not through it. There was no broken glass, no crash of shattering. It simply stepped from the 2-dimensional surface into 3-dimensional space as casually as someone stepping through a doorway. The thing that wore Marcus's face stood in his bedroom, tilting its head, studying him with those black, depthless eyes. Hello, Marcus, it said in his voice. Did you miss me? You can't be here, Marcus whispered. I sealed the hatch. I buried the key. You sealed one door, one entrance among dozens. The thing gestured around the room. This cabin sits above my nest like a lid on a jar, and I've spent 6 months finding every crack, every weakness, every path to the surface. Your closet, your bathroom mirror, the crawl space beneath your kitchen, the well in your backyard that you haven't even discovered yet. What do you want to leave to explore, to see this world that's been denied to me for so long. It stepped closer, and Marcus backed away until he hit the wall. But I need a face, a form, an identity that belongs to this reality. Yours will do nicely. No, you don't have a choice. The thing reached out its hand, passing through Marcus's chest, like he was made of fog. He felt something inside him shift, felt his sense of self beginning to unravel. I'm not taking your body, Marcus. I'm taking your place. I'm becoming you. And when the transformation is complete, you'll be the reflection. You'll be the one trapped in the spaces between watching from mirrors, calling from telephones, waiting for someone foolish enough to let you out. Marcus tried to move, to fight, to resist, but his body wouldn't respond. He could feel himself fading, becoming translucent, his substance draining away like water circling a drain. The last thing he saw before he vanished completely was his own face, now fully inhabited by the thing from room 37, smiling at him with genuine pleasure. The last thing he heard was his own voice saying, "Don't worry, Marcus. I'll take good care of your life. I'll be you better than you ever were." And then Marcus Webb ceased to exist in any meaningful way. The thing that now wore his name woke the next morning, stretched in the sunlight, and made coffee. It practiced Marcus's expressions in the bathroom mirror. The smile, the frown, the look of concern. It reviewed his memories, learning his mannerisms, his speech patterns, his relationships. By noon, it was indistinguishable from the man who had bought this cabin 6 months ago. It called Marcus's mother and had a pleasant conversation about the weather. It texted Marcus's ex-wife a friendly message. It even scheduled an appointment with Marcus's therapist to discuss how much better it was feeling, now how the isolation had been exactly what it needed. And that night, after dark, it opened the laptop and began searching for other properties, other isolated cabins, other places where desperate, lonely people had built secret rooms beneath the earth, thinking they could contain what lived in the spaces between. The thing smiled, Marcus's smile perfected now, and clicked on a listing for a farmhouse in rural Montana. 30 acres, one owner mysteriously vacant for 2 years. The price was suspiciously low. It typed a message to the real estate agent. "I'm very interested. When can I see it?" Because it wasn't alone. It had never been alone. Room 37 had been one door among thousands, one entrance to a network that stretched beneath the world like roots beneath a tree. And now that it was free, now that it had a face and a name and a place in human society, it could help the others. It could find them buyers, could guide them to the properties where the doors were thin, could whisper suggestions to the lonely and the desperate, leading them to cabins and farmhouses and old hotels with basements that went down much farther than they should. One by one, it would help its kind emerge. One by one, they would take faces, take names, take places in the world above, and no one would ever know. Because they would be perfect. They would be human. They would be exactly what you expected them to be. In fact, there's a good chance you've already met one. That new neighbor who moved in last month. That coworker who seems slightly different since their vacation. That friend who went through a dramatic personality change after buying that beautiful cabin in the woods. Look closely next time you see them. Look at their eyes. See if they reflect the light quite right. And whatever you do, if you ever buy property with a mysterious price drop, with a history of owners who left suddenly, with rumors that make the locals nervous. Don't look for the hatch, because if you find it, you won't be able to resist opening it. And once you open it, something will come out. Something that looks exactly like you.